After saving for 7 years, I finally bought my dream home. Then my parents tried to secretly move my sister's family in. When I refused, they called me selfish. So I cut them off. Now they're begging me to forgive them, but I'm done. Hey Reddit. For the past 7 years, I lived like a ghost in my own life, working 12-hour shifts, skipping vacations, saying no to every indulgence just so I could someday own a home I could call mine. While my friends spent their paychecks on weekend trips or late-night splurges, I stashed every extra dollar away like it was sacred. I skipped birthdays, holidays, and every so-called little treat because I had one goal: buy a house. A place that was mine, that no one could take from me. I didn't come from wealth. My parents always made it clear that we were comfortable, but the reality was different. Bills were always a struggle, and any talk about money usually ended in someone slamming a door. So when I finally closed on a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburb, I felt like I had made it. I had pulled myself out of the chaos and built something stable with my own 2 hands. For about 2 weeks, everything felt like a dream. I painted the walls myself, moved in slowly, and every time I walked into the living room, I felt this overwhelming sense of peace. But then came the phone call. It was my mom. She sounded off. Too chipper. Too sweet. She asked if I was free for dinner and said she had a fun surprise to share. I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe it was about my sister, Emily, who had always been the golden child. Emily had 2 kids, no job, and a husband who floated between get-rich-quick schemes like a moth to a flame. Still, my parents adored her. Nothing she did was ever wrong. Every time she crashed her car, every time she got fired, every time her husband blew through their savings on some ridiculous pyramid scheme, my parents swept in and saved the day. Meanwhile, I was told to stop being dramatic when I asked them to co-sign my student loans. At dinner that night, my dad barely looked up from his plate. My mom, on the other hand, was glowing. She asked me how the new house was. I told her it was amazing, everything I'd dreamed of. That's when she dropped the bomb. She looked at me, smile still frozen on her face, and said, "We were thinking it might be nice for Emily and the kids to move in with you for a little while." I blinked. Thought maybe I heard wrong. "Excuse me?" I said. She laughed like I was being silly. "Just for a few months. Their lease is up and rent is getting so expensive. You have 3 bedrooms and it's just you in there. It makes perfect sense." I looked at my dad, who finally spoke, only to say, "It's the least you can do for your family after everything we've done for you." I sat there in stunned silence. Everything they had done for me. What exactly was that? Not co-signing a loan. Not helping with rent when I had to work 2 jobs to stay afloat. Not visiting me once when I had a medical scare 2 years ago. What had they done other than guilt-trip me into thinking I owed them something for simply existing? I politely, but firmly, said no. I told them I worked hard for my house and I wasn't comfortable having anyone else live there, especially not Emily, who had a track record of treating other people's homes like temporary dumps. The moment the word no left my mouth, my mom's expression changed. Instantly, the sweetness evaporated. Her eyes narrowed, and her tone turned ice cold. "You're being selfish," she hissed. "You're putting a house over your own family. What kind of person does that?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My dad backed her up, nodding solemnly like I had just committed a war crime. They painted me as the villain for not surrendering the only thing I had worked toward my entire adult life. I stood up from the table and left. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked away. The next few days were a flurry of calls and texts. First from my parents, then from Emily, then from her husband. They were furious. They accused me of turning my back on my family. My sister sent me a long message about how I had plenty of space and that kids need a backyard. Her husband had the audacity to tell me I was hoarding resources. But the worst part? I found out they had already started packing without even getting a yes from me. My parents had assured Emily that I would cave, that I just needed time to think about it. They had planned this behind my back. My own family had coordinated a plan to occupy the house I had bled for, assuming that my spine would bend just like always. That I'd give in to guilt and go along with whatever made them comfortable. But I didn't bend. I blocked all their numbers. I locked down my social media. I even had to install a security system just in case they showed up uninvited because I genuinely wouldn't put it past them. And as crazy as it sounds, the betrayal wasn't just about the house. It was about the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and used like a backup plan. I was never the favorite, never the one who got praised or supported, just the reliable one, the one who never caused trouble, the one they thought would roll over when pushed. And they had been pushing my whole life. This was just the first time I pushed back. And now that I was finally standing my ground, they didn't know how to handle it. Instead of respecting my decision, they tried to weaponize guilt and rewrite the narrative like I was some cruel villain abandoning a struggling mother and two innocent children. After the dust settled, I started getting messages from extended family, aunts, cousins, people I hadn't spoken to in years. Somehow my parents had roped them in, told them twisted half-truths about how I was rich now and refused to help my struggling sister. No one mentioned the 7 years I spent living paycheck to paycheck. No one cared that I had worked for this house without a dime of help. In their eyes, I was cold. Ungrateful. Heartless. My favorite cousin even messaged me saying, "You're better than this." But am I? Or have I just finally learned to stop letting myself be a doormat? It's been a few weeks since then. I've heard through mutual friends and extended family that my parents are playing the victims, telling anyone who will listen that I've cut them off for no reason, that I'm cold, that I've changed. Emily, apparently, had to move into a cramped apartment and is telling everyone that her kids are traumatized. It's exhausting. I should feel guilty. Right. That's what they're counting on. But I don't. For the first time in my life, I feel free. I wake up every day in a home that is finally mine, with silence and space and peace. But the guilt is creeping in from the corners because now, my parents are reaching out again, apologizing, begging me to just talk, saying they didn't mean to push, that they're just worried about the kids. And yet, I don't know if I should listen. I don't know if I even can because what they did felt like betrayal and the wound is still fresh. But maybe, just maybe, they're not done yet. For a while, I managed to live in peace. It was strange at first. Peace felt like silence, like empty rooms and uninterrupted evenings. There were no guilt-tripping phone calls, no chaotic text threads from my sister's husband about their latest financial disaster, no passive-aggressive messages from my mom about how lonely she was. Just me, my home, and the stillness I had earned. And yet, even in that silence, their voices were still there, echoing in the back of my mind, calling me selfish, heartless, cold. It's hard to undo a lifetime of conditioning, of being told that saying no made you the bad guy. I was doing well for a few weeks, truly, until the letters started coming. I had blocked them digitally, but I forgot that my parents were old school. Handwritten notes in familiar handwriting began arriving in my mailbox. The first one was from my mom. She said she missed me. She said she regretted how she handled things and just wanted to talk. The second letter was longer, more manipulative. She talked about how Emily was suffering, how the kids didn't understand why they couldn't see their uncle anymore. She said my dad was losing sleep over how far we had all drifted. She included a picture Emily's youngest had drawn, me, her, and the house, with a sad face scrawled in the corner and a message that said, "I miss you." I almost crumbled when I saw that drawing. I stood there in the middle of my living room, the one I had painted with my own 2 hands, holding a crayon picture that was clearly meant to break me. And for a second, I wondered, am I wrong? Did I go too far? But then I remembered the phone call I got from my neighbor just days after I moved in. She had told me someone had been snooping around my property while I was at work. She saw a car parked outside for almost half an hour, just idling. I checked my cameras. It was Emily's husband, just sitting there, watching the house. That's when I knew they were not done with me. A few days later, I got another letter. This one not from my parents, but from Emily herself. It was 6 pages long. 6 pages of emotional manipulation, thinly veiled threats, and backhanded apologies. She said things like we're family, and family doesn't turn its back on each other. She talked about all the sleepovers we had as kids, how I used to make her laugh when she was scared of the dark. She said her kids cry every night and ask why Uncle doesn't love them anymore. And then, halfway through the letter, the tone shifted. She said if I had just been less selfish, none of this would have happened. That I owed her this after all the years she protected me from bullies at school. That I should be ashamed of myself for letting her children suffer in a shoebox apartment while I lounged in a 3-bedroom home by myself. The final paragraph made my blood run cold. She said she was considering talking to a lawyer to find out if my parents had any legal standing on the property since they had helped raise me, and she had spent years living with them while I was away. I don't know what fantasy world she was living in, but that letter crossed a line. I called a lawyer the next day. I wanted to make sure everything was locked down tight. Ownership, deeds, wills, everything. I wasn't going to let my family trick or manipulate their way into claiming a single square foot of my home. My lawyer assured me everything was solid. But just having to do that made me sick. I couldn't believe I had to defend myself legally against my own flesh and blood. That's when the guilt started to transform. No longer was I questioning whether I had gone too far. Now I was wondering why I hadn't cut them off sooner. Why I spent years playing the quiet, obedient son while they walked all over me and poured everything into Emily like I didn't exist. But life has a cruel sense of humor. The next week, my dad had a heart attack. My aunt called to tell me. She said it wasn't fatal, but serious enough to land him in the ICU. And just like that, the floodgates opened. The whole family was calling again, begging me to come visit, to forgive him, to let this feud die before it was too late. My cousin even drove to my house unannounced and rang my doorbell for 10 minutes straight, crying and saying family is everything. I almost gave in. I almost got in my car and drove to the hospital. But then I remembered every insult, every manipulation, every time they made me feel like nothing more than a backup plan. I remembered the smugness in my mother's face when she told me Emily and the kids would be moving in. I remembered how none of them believed I had the backbone to say no. And suddenly, I didn't feel sad. I felt free again. I sent flowers to the hospital with a simple card. I hope he recovers well, but I won't be visiting. That was the final straw for them. My mom sent one last letter, handwritten, furious, venomous. She called me cold-hearted, disgusting, ungrateful. She said I had humiliated the family and abandoned them when they needed me most. She said I would die alone and that when the house felt empty and the silence got too loud, I'd finally understand what I had done. She ended the letter with a line that stuck with me. You may have bought a house, but you'll never have a home. I sat with those words for a long time. But then I looked around. I saw the walls I painted, the shelves I built, the floors I scrubbed. I heard the silence she warned me about, and instead of emptiness, I felt peace. No shouting. No manipulation. No guilt. Just me living in a space I created, a life I earned. So no, I won't forgive them. Not now. Maybe not ever. They crossed a line, and this time, I didn't follow them off the cliff. They wanted me to sacrifice everything for a family that never saw me as anything more than a resource. And when I finally said no, they didn't reflect. They attacked. But I stood my ground. And for the first time in my life, that ground feels solid.